just every emotion. It was like the movie The Giver, where you just experience everything that could have ever happened on earth all at once. That's what it felt like. And the only things that were really sticking out for me very vividly was the pain, the suffering. And then once I kind of traveled out of that deep darkness, that anguish, I started to travel into the light, and I was greeted by loved ones that had crossed over. My father was there to greet me, and he had committed suicide 11 years before my experience. My mother's voice was also there to guide me. She also committed suicide with my father 11 years before. They were both very impoverished and immersed in their own drug addiction. And so to hear their voices or to feel their energy was, I was like, oh, I'm dead too. Great. Great. Now I'm dead as well. And I couldn't really put any of it together at first. And then while I was in that space, I was shown that I am a divine spiritual soldier sent to earth on a mission. And I was downloaded with the awareness of the Great Awakening.
Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Let Thy Single Eye Be Still. My name is Travis Cosentino, and my next guest today is Betty Guadagno. Thank you so much for joining me, Betty. How are you?
Hi. Thanks so much for this space.
Absolutely. My pleasure. So you've had a pretty amazing near-death experience, but yours is a little bit different because you weren't happy that you were there.
Yeah, definitely. So I had a near-death-like experience. I wasn't actually pronounced dead, but I did have an experience that mirrors so many other near-death experiencers. I have some language for it today. What I experienced was a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. So all of my energy centers came activated and online all at the exact same moment. And this was onset by a drug overdose. And so when I entered the space of eternity, I was a militant atheist upon my arrival. So I was pretty pissed that I was wrong. And yeah, I was also very upset that there was something more. And then throughout my experience, I learned about my pre-birth planning. So how some people believe in an afterlife. I was shown that there's actually a life before life where we pick out all of our challenges and adversity and our purpose and our mission. And all of these things were rubbing me the wrong way because I had been through a lot of trauma in my life. I'm an orphan to suicide. I'm a recovering drug addict. I was a prostitute, an atheist. I was homeless. I had a lot of really intense trauma that happened to me in my life. And so being faced with the creator, the divine, the universe, was not something that I was willing to accept at first. But as the experience continued on, I'm so grateful for my shift in perception because this reality that I'm living in now is way better than the last one.
I mean, I can tell. I saw the picture that you sent me when were you on drugs back then?
Oh, definitely. All the drugs. Yes, definitely.
It did seem that way. You look totally different now. You look like a completely different person, unrecognizable.
It's crazy. Yeah. It's just spirit, it's spirit. It's recovery. I belong to a 12-step fellowship, definitely staying steadfast in my healing process, not just for me, but for my entire family line and the collective in general. And that really lights my spirit up. And it's made my whole face transform, my whole body transform.
Yeah. I mean, it shows you definitely have a glow about you. And you can tell that's with people that not only have a good perspective on life, but they're generally like a good person. You can feel a good person when they walk in the room. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm not always a great person, but I do try much more than I did before.
You definitely have good energy. So that's cool. So let's just kind of start from the beginning. What was it? What led you to this experience?
I was a homeless drug addict. I was a prostitute, and I was really coming to the end of the road for my addiction. And my awakening was onset by a drug overdose. And that was what led me into my spiritual experience. And I experienced a life review. But not only did I experience a life review for me, I experienced a life review for what felt like the entire collective, or at least my family line, because I was experiencing experiences that didn't happen to me. Like I felt the loss of a child. And I saw my aunt come into my mind because my cousin died when I was 16. And I felt my aunt's pain from losing her daughter. And that wasn't my life experience to be feeling, but it felt like I was feeling everything for my entire family. And then I started feeling everything for the entire collective. And once I started to sift more into the spiritual experience, I asked that wonderful question of, well, why? Why does the world exist? And then I was downloaded with just every emotion. It was like the movie The Giver, where you just experience everything that could have ever happened on earth all at once. That's what it felt like. And the only things that were really sticking out for me very vividly what was the pain, the suffering. And then once I kind of traveled out of that deep darkness, that anguish, I started to travel into the light. And I was greeted by loved ones that had crossed over. My father was there to greet me, and he had committed suicide 11 years before my experience. My mother's voice was also there to guide me. She also committed suicide with my father 11 years before. They were both very impoverished and immersed in their own drug addiction. And so to hear their voices or to feel their energy was, I was like, oh, I'm dead too. Great. Great. Now I'm dead as well. And I couldn't really put any of it together at first. And then while I was in that space, I was shown that I am a divine spiritual soldier sent to earth on a mission. And I was downloaded with the awareness of the Great Awakening. And mind you, I was a militant atheist. I had never heard any of these words before. I didn't know what a chakra was. I didn't even know what spiritual awakening was. I definitely didn't know what the Great Awakening was. But I saw myself with the thousands of other soldiers that I made this jump to earth with. And we had a commander in the center that was guiding us. And it was this beautiful, bright light. And you can call that light Christ or Krishna, Buddha, higher consciousness, source, whatever language resonates for you, because it's truly all the same. And then I was taken through the details of my pre-birth plan as well. And I was shown that I chose everything in my life that had ever happened to me. And I picked the partners, and the partners picked me that those experiences would happen with. And I definitely did not want to come back to Earth. I was like, you guys, Earth sucks. It's like a dumpster fire down there. You do not prepare us for this. I am not going back. No way, no how. And they were very adamant that I signed up for something and I had to complete it. It wasn't a punishment. It was just finishing the video game. And, it's like so fast. There's no such thing as time there. It's basically like putting on a headset and then taking it directly off. It's instantaneous what our life is here. Now here on Earth, it seems very long and linear, but there's no such thing as time. And when I refused to go back into my body, they told me that I would be reborn. And they showed me the baby that I would be reborn into. And she was going to have to live most of the life experiences that I had already lived. And I was like, no, there's no way I'm starting from zero. No way, no how. I guess I'll go back into her. And then after my experience, I just wrote it off as drug-induced psychosis. I got so high that I thought I was talking to God. And I just thought that was so crazy and I'll never be that messed up ever again. And I just ignored my whole experience after that.
Wow. That's actually wild. But it's not uncommon. I mean, a lot of people second guess something like that because when you come out of it, it's almost like it was a dream, So you're not sure. But I've heard where like people have said, I didn't believe, but I kept getting signs that it did happen. I was like, I guess it did happen,
Yes, definitely. That was my experience as well. The signs and synchronicities were just being thrown in my face. There was no way for me to ignore them.
Yeah, that's wild. Okay, so I do have some questions. You had mentioned that you had a Kundalini experience. Can you explain to our viewers what that is?
Yeah, sure. So if you don't know what the word Kundalini means, that's okay. Neither did I. The word roughly translates into life force. So in different cultures, we might call it different things. Now, Kundalini is an Eastern term. And in the Western world, we might call it receiving the Holy Spirit. And basically what a Kundalini awakening is it's depicted as a coiled serpent at the base of your spine at your root chakra. And as your Kundalini awakens, the serpent rises up and straightens out, and it activates all of your chakras and puts them online. So there's different kinds of meditations and yogas that are specific to the Kundalini. Mine was a spontaneous awakening that was onset by a drug overdose, which I highly do not recommend. But there are ways to awaken your Kundalini energy naturally through meditation, breath work, and yoga. And when the Kundalini awakens, it's not some beautiful spiritual awakening. It's a whole life transformation. It's a 180-degree shift. For me, it was anyway, because my life was so in spiritual unawareness that to come into awareness, it was like every cell in my body demanded to transform 180 degrees. When my third eye and my crown opened as the energy was going up and down my body, it actually caused my spirit to shoot out of what felt like the crown of my head and go into the space of eternity. And the actual experience was very physically jarring because there was energy going up and down me. I'm sure it probably looked like I was having a seizure. My body was convulsing. I was like leaking liquids all over myself. It was a mess. It was not cute. But it was very transformative.
That is amazing. I love the way that you explain that. It immediately made me think of the sacred secretion. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
So the sacred secretion is essentially, it's an action that you perform for yourself to experience God. And so what you do is on the 29 and a half cycle of the moon, which is your birth sign. So you do this once a month. 3 days prior to that, you fast. You do a water fast, and you think only good thoughts. You don't have sex. You don't drink alcohol. You just remove any kind of substance that lowers your vibration, and you meditate and you pray, and you do this for 3 days. And on the third day, so what happens is there's a chemical process that happens within the it's not the pineal. It's another part of the brain that creates this milky white substance, and it makes its journey down the spine, your 33 vertebrae, and it sits in this cave in your lower root chakra for 3 days. And on the third day, if you are vibrating at that higher frequency, it'll then rise back up and turn into a honey-like substance, which is DMT, and that's how you experience God.
Wow,
yeah,
that's fascinating.
It's an alchemical process that happens within every person's body,
Yeah,
and so. That's just amazing that basically you experienced it by drug inducing it, which is typical of, like, I guess, mushrooms or acid or something like that. But you actually died.
Well, I don't know if I actually died. I don't think that I actually died. Again, it's a near-death-like experience, a Kundalini awakening. I didn't have a doctor tell me that my heart stopped. I was very
out of body.
I was out of body, but I was also very aware of my body. Like, I knew that I was physically vibrating so much, like my body was convulsing. So yeah, but it's all the same markers of a near-death experience, which for me just, really solidifies the fact that awakening is happening whether you die or you don't die. Like, we are waking up right now, and it will happen however it's meant to happen for each person.
Yeah, and that kind of leads us into that sort of great reset, but I don't want to go to that just yet. I do want to talk about that. But you talked about being in this darkness where you were experiencing the pain that you had put on others, and so decisions that you had made, and then you felt deeply the pain that you had put on other people and how those ripples affected everyone. Do you think that was like your own personal hell?
Absolutely. Yes. I think that maybe the collective has gotten confused about this dual idea of heaven and hell. I truly believe that there's no such thing as condemnation. I know that there's not. You don't have to know that. I have a deep knowing in it. I'll hold that vision for all of us. But I do think that I created my own hell, because I was the only one condemning me. God wasn't condemning me. Spirit wasn't condemning me. I was staying stuck in all of that. And it was the decisions that I made throughout my life, which I used my free will to make those decisions.
Mm-hmm. So you were taking personal responsibility for your actions.
Absolutely.
Fascinating. And so when you say it was a dark place, physically, it was just this all-encompassing darkness?
It was very dark. I've heard some people describe heaven as like velvety, beautiful darkness. This was more like static and cement and spikes. And I was having a lot of vivid imagery going through my mind, like the the situation I just shared about my aunt losing her daughter. Like I felt myself in my aunt's body, seeing scenes through her eyes. And I also experienced my parents' suicide from their perspective and my perspective. So I was
Oh,
seeing the spaces through their eyes, and I was feeling their feelings. And I was also feeling my feelings. And yeah, it was like just this ocean of deep, dark anguish that I was drowning in. And I did have the thought, oh, okay, I died and I'm in hell. And then I started to hear the voices of my father and my boyfriend who had recently passed away. They were both there to guide me. And they just kept saying, you are worthy of all the love in the universe. You are worthy of all the love in the universe. And I started to follow their voices. And that's when I traveled into the light.
that is so beautiful. I love that. Wow. That's okay. I love that. Okay. And so hold on. Before you were talking about how you were essentially in heaven and you saw your father and you saw your mother who had died by suicide. And what was going through your mind when you saw them? I mean, like, it's kind of a big deal, right?
Yeah, definitely. You know, my mom wasn't really present. She was present for the first part of the awakening experience. And then I kind of went into the scene of the suicide and then she kind of faded out. But my dad was there with me the whole time. There's not really physical sight. There was definitely like a feeling. Like my dad's with me all the time. He's my number one spirit guide. He's always right over my left shoulder. And definitely, you know, everything that I had been taught throughout life. One of the main reasons why I was an atheist is because the only thing that I really knew about religion or God was what I had heard about the Bible. And in the Bible, it says that if you commit suicide, you go to this place called the pit. And I couldn't imagine my parents suffering their whole human lives and then having to suffer for all of eternity as well. And so it just made more sense to me to reject the whole idea of God because I didn't want to think of my parents suffering anymore. And you know, now that I have my father as my guide, and it's very layered when it comes to my relationship with my dad, it has a lot to do with alternate realities and the multiverse and parallel realities. But, you know, to know that our loved ones who, you know, choose this exit point in life, they're not condemned. They might have to come back and do some stuff over again. Or they might shift to a different timeline where they're still meant to complete their life goals, which is my relationship with my dad. He communicates to me from an alternate reality, from an alternate timeline that shifted in his suicide attempt. It was an attempt, and here it was successful. And that's very layered and very deep. But I will say that to know that our loved ones who cross over by suicide aren't condemned was really freeing for me.
Yeah, I actually really enjoy hearing things like this because, you know, I just switched over to Christianity a couple of years ago. And prior to my Christianity, I very much saw things the way that you do. And so it really kind of messes with my psyche when I hear somebody like yourself who basically went to heaven, but you were an atheist.
Yeah,
And
Christians hate that. Christians really don't
yeah,
like that. They don't like hearing that, which I'm not
no, I
exactly
do
sure.
like hearing it. I'm
Yeah.
okay with it, you know, because I believed it, and I'm still conflicted on it, you know, like it just makes the most sense that, you know, there's no reason for us to suffer for our eternity. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
think one of the big takeaways from my experience is that the world that we live inside of here is a dream. And when I woke up in eternity, it was literally like I woke up from sleeping from a dream. I could only remember 3 seconds of my life. I could only remember my parents' suicide, nothing else from 35
Mm.
years of living. I was like the same way when you wake up from an actual sleeping dream and you're like, whoa, that dream was so weird. Wait, what happened? There were purple elephants and the rest of it's gone. I don't remember. And that's kind of what it felt like in eternity. And, that's my biggest takeaway. It does kind of conflict with some Christian beliefs. And when I first came back from my experience, I went to an evangelical church. I wanted to become born again. I went to a Baptist church. I kept trying to find my tribe. I kept trying to find what was right for me. I knew that it had something to do with Jesus, but I didn't know exactly what it was. And through my spiritual integration process, it was discovering A Course in Miracles, which is a channeled message from Jesus. For me, that book has completely reprogrammed and rewired me. And again, solidified my belief that we live inside of a dream. This is an illusion. It can either be a happy dream or it can be a nightmare. And that's all up to my thought forms. And so today I decide to reprogram and take an active role in my life and choose to heal so that I don't have to get stuck in that victim mentality or poverty mentality or anything that makes my experience less than happy.
Yes, 100%. Exactly what you just said. I mean, it gives me peace to have this interview because, yeah, I'm conflicted. Your religion, it tells you one thing, but everybody else or other people are saying another. And I think my favorite interviews so far are with people that were atheists or they didn't have any spiritual connection whatsoever, because they seem to have the most profound experiences as well as logical, I guess. It just makes sense,
I love
and
logic.
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. I love that. And oh man, that is so wild. I've never heard somebody say that when they were in heaven, it was like waking from a dream and they could barely remember their past life.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just like waking up from an actual dream. It was bizarre. It was so crazy. And I could not grab any of my life. It was like nothing was standing out because nothing mattered because I was awake and I was home. So I was like, well, why am I going to remember that nightmare? That sucked. I don't want to remember that. And it was just so exciting to be home and to feel that feeling of home.
That's amazing. That is so amazing. And another thing with like time, in terms of like time on the other side, there is no time. I understand that. But I remember recently I was listening to another NDE where a guy was basically in the same sort of hell that you were in. He was in this all-encompassing darkness and he was thinking about all these things. And Jesus came to him. It wasn't his father, it was Jesus that came. And Jesus says, you've served your time. It's time to come back with us. And he was just like, well, how long have I been here? He says, you've been here 10,000 years. And he says, well, it only felt like a couple minutes, which is interesting. So it's like our timeline on Earth is moving so much faster than it is on the other side. The other side, it's like barely moving, if anything. And it just makes me wonder, like, I was just thinking this when I was meditating a couple of days ago, that maybe on the other side, we're computing things so quickly that it's moving faster than the speed of light or something like that.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense to me for sure. Yeah, the idea of time, that definitely doesn't exist there. I know that for me, my awakening was around 6 to 8 hours because when it started, it was light out, and when it ended, it was dark out. And I know that like it was physically happening in my physical reality for a very long time. But I definitely agree with the idea that we're moving faster than light, or, the idea of being so present, which is what eternity is. It's just instant presence. And you're just in the moment. There's no other moments that are happening. So maybe that does translate into some sort of number of years and time, but definitely the hell, like the life review, it felt so weighted that I could understand it being 10,000 years because it's so far away from what our true nature is, that maybe that has something to do with it too. For me, the experience of the life review or the collective life review, because it was so weighted and so heavy, it could be maybe that we're 10,000 years away from from actual reality, because that anguish and that pain is so far away from our natural state, which is unconditional love and joy. So maybe there's like a distance and a time that kind of connects. It's a cool thought to start to think about.
Totally, totally. And I mean, we could just sit here and talk about that forever. But you said that when you got out of this, you didn't believe that it happened, and you said you got high more after that.
Definitely.
So
yes.
it was like nothing happened, you know. But you said you had signs and synchronicities. Did you believe in signs and synchronicities before this?
Definitely not. I never even knew what a sign was, or I definitely didn't know what the word synchronicity was. Definitely not. But my experiences with them were overwhelming, so overwhelming. It was so clear to me that my experience was a real one, and I had to get onto a different path. And I also experienced a spontaneous healing out of heroin withdrawal. One of the main reasons why I stayed using drugs was because if I didn't use some sort of opiate, I would get physically ill. And so I experienced a spontaneous healing. And that was obviously the real kicker. I was like, okay, this is no longer like weird signs or numbers on the clock or feathers falling in my face. I've actually experienced a healing. I think I need to pay attention now and start to do things differently.
What was the thing that was healed?
So I was in the midst of heroin withdrawal. I was on day 3 of heroin withdrawal, which is the absolute worst, most agonizing pain a person can be in. And the worst part about withdrawal from a substance is that there's nothing actually physically wrong with you. I'm not cut. I'm not bleeding. I haven't been punched or stabbed, but it feels like I have. And it's just because my brain is so unwired that nothing is connecting properly. And so I think that I'm in physical pain. And that's why I stayed on substances for so long. I used illicit substances for over 20 years. And in my healing experience, I was so desperate. And I knew what my parents had gone through, because the pain of withdrawal and the agony of being poor and needing to get more drugs, but not having any way to do that, all of those things were so overwhelming for me. And it felt totally insane. And I had this moment of like it was like a mental suicide or a spiritual suicide. And I heard somebody's voice come into my head, and it said that I could request what I wanted fixed. And I was in the throes of desperation. So I was like, okay, strange voice, please fix my brain. I don't want to feel like I'm in pain. Heal me from my withdrawal. And I counted backwards from 10, and I saw these 2 little men appear in my mind's eye, and they were wearing white lab coats, and they had these bulbous noses, and they had these little lawnmowers, and I watched them walk through every crevice of my mind. And as they walked through and they mowed out these new neural pathways for me, it was like these intense hot tingles started to flood everywhere that they walked. And then it felt like somebody drew X's across my forehead. And then a plunger went down on the crown of my head. And as it plunged back up, there was this bright white flash. And in that moment, I was instantaneously healed out of day 3 of heroin withdrawal. I mean, like moments before, I was sick all over myself. My bones felt like they were made of fire, and my skin felt like it was made of broken glass, and everything hurt. And then all of a sudden, I was completely well and healed and fine and no longer sick. And just to display the contrast, before this experience, I was an atheist, an orphan to suicide. I was a homeless meth head prostitute strung out on heroin. I was a liar, a manipulator, a thief. I was a racist. I was a rapist. I was all of the things that you would think would condemn you to the exact opposite of what I was experiencing. And I was still loved unconditionally and just bestowed with this overwhelming amount of grace and healing. And it was so beautiful. And I threw myself on the ground and I was crying out to the divine. How could this be happening? I don't believe in this. I don't believe in you. You could not have picked a more unworthy subject to bestow this kind of grace on. And after that experience, it became very clear to me that my spiritual experience was a true one. And I thought I was the second coming of Christ. I was out on the New York City subway system, laying hands on homeless drug addicts, like, I can heal you. Let me heal you. It was crazy, crazy. It was nuts.
That is wild. And let me tell you, like, as from what I've heard, a heroin addiction is the hardest thing to overcome.
It is really brutal. It definitely is. There's other substances that are equally brutal to come off of, but it is really challenging.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how long it takes somebody to actually sort of come off something like that, or that you ever would come off it. But I thought it was interesting that on the third day that happened.
Wow, yeah. Well, the third day is generally the worst day of withdrawal, and that's why I make a point to say it, but I've never thought about how you just said it before. That is very interesting and beautiful. It typically takes around 7 days to physically withdraw from heroin. I mean, in reality, it takes a couple of weeks to actually get back to any sort of semblance of normalcy in your physical body. But it's like a 5 to 7 day, really brutal experience. And yeah, I've never thought about the third day before like that. Thank you for that awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because the previous interview that I did, she had her experience where she saw Jesus Christ in the sky. It was an out of body experience on the third day. Okay. She had seen a seer, or like a prophetess in her church. It was a Christian church that had something like this. And the lady said, do this for 3 days in your backyard, pray, meditate, ask your questions to God. And on the third day, you will see something. And sure enough, on the third day, something happened. So I think there's something with divine timing on that third day, how God likes to work. And we're on to
Yeah,
something there.
my awakening was also, it was on March 23rd, which is the beginning of the season of Aries, which is the symbol of rebirth. And it's actually the first day of the year in many different religions and societies. In the Western world, the first day of the year is January 1st, but it used to be a couple hundred years ago that March 21st, or, like right there in that, the spring equinox was the first day of the year. And my awakening started at 3:33 p.m. And the only reason why I know that is because I tried to record myself while it was happening, because I was like, whoa, something crazy is going on. I got to get this on film. And then my camera cuts out like a minute later because I had no way of doing that. It just like did not happen. But yeah, there's definitely, I think the divine shows up in numbers, and these numbers are symbols, and they're a language that maybe we can't understand in our human mind, but they definitely are tools that I believe the other side uses to communicate with us, and they have meaning.
Absolutely. I mean, and that kind of brings in another conversation. The way that God or our guides or our angels communicate with us, I do believe is definitely with numbers and obviously other signs, but predominantly numbers for me. And those sequence of numbers mean something. All of them do. And it's profound. And I thank God for the internet, because you could just look it up and know exactly what it means, But before, 20 years ago, you couldn't look that up. It wasn't available to you,
And I promise you that there was a point in time where maybe 10 years ago, that I looked up, what does 1111 mean? And it didn't say anything like it says now. And I really feel like I shifted timelines. But if I can tell you my first story of running into numbers, I'd really love to do that.
Please
So
do.
yeah, on Halloween of 2018, I had a series of awakenings that kind of led to this big, huge awakening. And I was kind of in the midst of my brain sort of cracking open a little bit at a time. So Halloween, which is a day that they say that the veil is very thin. I was charging my phone at a portable charging station. Again, I was basically homeless. So, my phone never had a charge, and I was a drug addict. I was like running around. I was crazy. I'm charging my phone. It's got an 8% charge on it. It's 8:08 p.m. and I'm looking at my bank account, and it has $88.88 in it. And
Wow.
but I had never heard of numbers. I had never heard of this phenomenon before. So I was like, oh, that's weird. I took a screenshot, went on with my life. 8 days later, I met this man who told me that his life path number in numerology was 8. And then I found out that my life path number is also 8 in numerology. And the number 8 has special significance. And it's, well, number 1, it's a symbol of infinity. And it's the number of manifestation. And numerology, it means being a business-minded leader and being very independent and things like that. So numerology is like astrology, but with numbers. And everybody has a particular life path number, and that number means specific things. Like Travis was just sharing. But yeah, you know, my whole world opened up to numbers after that initial experience. And I did not know what it meant. And I just they kept waking me up at 2:22 and 3:33 and 4:44 every morning. And I'm like, can this stop? What is going on?
Yeah, but I mean, I wouldn't want it to stop, because I love getting messages from God, from the other side. And have you ever had any signs, and I'm sure you have, but something other than numerology that like really jumped out at you, like, okay, you know?
Yeah, I've got a couple stories.
Okay.
So I'll tell you one of them. So while I was integrating my spiritual experience, I went to a long-term rehab because I had to learn how to live my life without using drugs. Even though I had had a really profound spiritual experience, it didn't mean that my cellular body understood how to break that muscle memory of feel a feeling, use a drug, feel a feeling, use a drug. So I went into a long-term rehab. That's why I was safe. I was locked away. I had nothing to do but read and learn and educate myself and integrate. And I read this book called The Universe Has Your Back. The author is Gabrielle Bernstein. And in the book, she says that you can ask the universe a question, select a sign, and if it's for your highest good, the sign will manifest within 24 hours. So I'm living in a long-term rehab, and I have a crush on some guy that lives in the outside world. And so I waste my spiritual question on some guy. I'm always doing that. Always, always, always. And I was like, okay, universe, is this guy for my highest good? And the first sign that popped into my head was a squirrel. And I was so mad at myself. I was like, why would you pick a squirrel? It's winter. There's snow outside. Like, there's no squirrels. They're all gone. And I was so upset with myself that I forgot the whole exercise. I was like, no, forget it. I don't care if the universe tells me whatever. I'm going to go do what I want to do when I want to do it. And so I went to go hang out with the guy, and I'm walking to his house. And mind you, I live in a long-term rehab. So I had to lie to the facility to get them to let me leave, because you're not just allowed to go out and have dates with random men while you're in rehab. Okay. So I'm watching the snow crunch beneath my shoes as I'm walking up to his house. And all of a sudden, a squirrel runs right across my feet and goes up this tree. And I have my headphones in, and I'm listening to a song about soulmates, and this whole movie is playing out. So I got the soundtrack in my ears, the spiritual sign staring me in the face. And then all of a sudden, the guy walks out of his apartment. And so it's like the leading man, this Adonis, is waiting for me. And this whole little movie took place. And it was so blessed, and it was so beautiful. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that my sign had manifested. And it was amazing. The next day, I'm walking down the street, and there was this random book on a mailbox. It was an abandoned book. It was there for anybody to take. I knew it was there for me. My intuition was so loud and so strong. Go pick up the book. I pick up the book. I open it up to a random page. The title of the chapter that I opened up the book to was entitled The Squirrel. These big, huge words staring me right in the face, man. It was crazy. My brain exploded, melted out of my ear into a puddle on the ground. I could not believe this was happening. The next day after that, because for me, it always happens in threes, there was this, again, it's snowing. There's no real squirrels outside. That first squirrel was a fluke. I'm sure it froze to death just to give me my spiritual sign. I'm walking down the street, the bottom of a lamppost, there's this gigantic sticker of a squirrel. So the lesson in all of this was that it didn't matter that I had this very limited human view of how my sign would come to me, and that because of the weather, I wouldn't receive it. And what was I thinking? The universe conspired in all of these different ways to send me my sign. Now, I asked if this guy was for my highest good. Now, my ego has a much different idea of what highest good means than my spirit does. So in my head, highest good means we're going to be in a relationship, we're going to live together, we're going to travel the world sharing joy and consciousness and whatever, like fantasy I had made up in my head. But it was actually for my highest good because it was this awesome lesson in rejection. And this guy rejected me. I kept saying to him, like, but what about all the squirrels? What about all the squirrels? And he was like, girl, you're psycho. I don't know what you're talking about.
That's so funny because I've been through the same thing.
Oh man.
Oh my God.
So brutal. It's so brutal. But I'm so grateful for that lesson because it really leveled me up. And it wasn't about, I kept asking, why did you guys send me all the squirrels if it was just to embarrass myself? And it really was that I was paying some sort of karmic debt and I was allowing, like an old wound to kind of come up and be cleansed so that I could go into the relationship that I would eventually find and be healed and much more confident and secure in myself and really following my intuition, even when it leads me down paths that aren't completely happy, joyous, and free.
Wow. That's beautiful. I absolutely love that. What a great story. That was funny. That was a great story.
Good one.
But man, it's so true. And like, I think there's such a benefit to people that are more spiritually in tune because we recognize the signs and we know that we're being communicated with and we know that there's a lesson there, and to be mindful of that, that's a really good way to look at life, I think. But we only have a little bit of time left. I wanted to ask you about the Course in Miracles. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. Let me just grab it so that you guys can see what it looks like. It's this beautiful book right here. Just a little bit of light reading. Just kidding. It's like 1,800 pages. It's basically like a Bible. So this is a book that is channeled by Jesus, and it's channeled through the mind of a militant atheist psychotherapist from Columbia University in the 1970s. You can definitely tell from the wording inside this book that it's not written from a human mind, and definitely an atheist couldn't conceptualize the things that's said in this book. So for me, when I read A Course in Miracles, what it helps me understand is that Jesus didn't leave us with the jumbled, mistranslated words of the Bible and nothing else for the last 2,000 years. He came back to help in the process of this awakening, to awaken from the dream within the dream. And inside of this book, there's a workbook, and it's got one lesson for each day of the year. And the workbook is a reprogramming. So the beginning lessons say things like, I don't know what this chair is for. I don't know what this sweater is for. Like you put in the object or the thing inside of the lesson. I don't know what this wall is for. I don't know what this apartment is for. I don't know what this person is for. And it's really about that reprogramming where my mind automatically assigns judgment and meaning to everything around me. And the Course starts to help me break that down. And it's really about forgiveness. And it's about, seeing everybody as myself. So seeing my brother as me and finding forgiveness for that, especially when somebody irritates me. I don't want to see them as myself because they're annoying. But there is a version of me that is quite annoying, and I need to recognize that. And, I'm really grateful for this book. I would recommend that if anybody's interested in finding out more about this book, to pick up a book about the book first. So before I actually got into the Course itself, I read about maybe 5 or 6 books about the Course first. And the one that I highly recommend until I write my own is A Course in Miracles Made Easy by Alan Cohen. He's got a very great digestible way of explaining what this book is about. And you can find out if it's for you by reading that book first to see if if the ideas resonate for you.
That's really cool. It's so cool. And I think it's similar to this one. It's called The Way of Mastery.
Yes.
And it's like 3 renditions of one book right here. And I don't know if it's written by the same person, but it's channeled through Jesus Christ and has some beautiful messages. And I was just thinking earlier when you were talking about this unconditional love that you're experiencing on the other side, how beautiful that was. But I think that the lesson, the ultimate lesson is is having unconditional love for our brothers and sisters the same way God has unconditional love for us. So having forgiveness, compassion, understanding, and trying our best to see why people make the decisions they do, good or bad, you know, and just loving them.
Absolutely. I think when I first had my awakening, one of the main things that I tried to implement was I started to see everybody as a newborn baby. Because I didn't really have a lot of spiritual concepts, but I just knew that we were all connected. That was definitely part of my spiritual experience, was seeing that oneness. And so instead of getting mad at somebody for behaving a certain way or talking to me a certain way, I just tried to see them as a newborn baby, full of unconditional love and joy. And wherever they just came from heaven. They're just entering their human experience. And to think about all of the things that has to happen in a baby's life in order to make them into the person who's deeply annoying me or cutting me off in traffic or, you know, like whatever it is. Things happen to make that little ball of unconditional love become the person that they are today. And so, yeah, exercising those spiritual principles of open-mindedness and patience, compassion, empathy, all the things that you just said as well. That's really what led me, you know, living my life guided by spiritual principles makes my life just so much freer. There's no words for it. And, you know, I'm not saying that I'm perfect. I still judge people all the time. I judge myself all the time. You know, it's my human conditioning. But when I can refocus myself, which now I can pull myself back pretty quickly from a judgment. Before it used to take days. Now it's like by the end of the day, I'm like, oh yeah, I did that today. Maybe tomorrow I'll try not to do that. But it's a practice. It's a practice. It's like building spiritual muscles the same way that I wouldn't go into a gym and expect to be a huge bodybuilder. As soon as I walk through the door, I can't expect to be some perfect spiritual soldier here on earth either. It just takes practice. And every day I'm trying to be the best version of myself.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. I love that. And kind of in closing, you know, talking about the Great Awakening and, you know, you're a soldier. What is your mission?
Oh, that's such a good one. Yeah. So, you know, I think that a lot of people get wrapped up in the idea of purpose. What is my spiritual purpose? What am I here to do? And it's not one specific thing. Purpose is whatever, for me, I'm going to talk about my own journey. I'm not going to speak truth for anybody else, but purpose is about what brings me joy. Am I living my life led by joy? So my purpose can change from moment to moment. Now, one of my purposes is to share the story that there is no condemnation, that our thoughts shape our reality, that squirrels are there to guide us, or whatever it might be in the moment. Sometimes that's my purpose. Other times my purpose is just to empathetically listen to somebody who needs to share something deep. Sometimes my purpose is to smile at a stranger on the street. Sometimes my mission is to hold a door open for somebody. It doesn't have to be some big, huge, tangible thing. I don't know the effect that I'm having on another person when I just act in a state of kindness or when I remember my light within. You know, I live in New York City, so there's a lot of stuff going on all the time. You know, like you walk down one sidewalk and you see every class, every race, every amount of trauma, every amount of joy. Like it's so layered here. There's every kind of person. And for me to just continue to walk through a situation like that, knowing that I'm connected to the divine, I don't have to go out and preach and teach and proselytize. That's not my purpose. You know, I can just continue to be a shining example that transformation is not only possible. For me, I think that it's inevitable. If an awakening happened to a person like me, awakening is going to happen to every living conscious being. I know it. I know it. And that's part of that great awakening. And so I just stay steadfast in my own healing process because I know that my healing, it ripples out and it affects other people without me tangibly doing anything.
So I do want to close it out because I know we're running out of time, but I did actually want to ask you something. There's this mural behind you. What is that?
This is Hieronymus Bosch, the Garden of Earthly Delights. And basically it is a 3-panel painting of birth, life, and death. I guess I'm going the wrong way. And in the first panel, the birth panel is Adam and Eve in the garden with Jesus. And then He's a great artist. He's like from, I think, the late 1800s in Amsterdam. Really creepy stuff. It's like, it's really, really weird. Yeah, check him out. It's great. I love his stuff.
That's cool. Adam and
Yeah.
Eve. That's a whole other conversation right
Oh
there.
yeah, man. Yeah, we could have a whole nother conversation about that for sure.
Yeah, I love talking about that stuff because I like to think about like the Gnostic teachings and the way
Yeah.
they read the Bible and the way it meant to them, and I'm very much into like the Essenes and the Dead Sea Scrolls and
Yeah.
the
I think
the
that's
real
part of
information.
awakening too, is like that insatiable thirst for knowledge and just wanting to know everything that's out there. I definitely did the same thing. Like I shared, I went through all these different faiths, and I also studied the Rosicrucian
Mhm.
information, which is like, an esoteric secret society. And that stuff really spoke to me and actually is really what helped me figure out how to manifest and utilize the law of attraction in my life as well.
Speaking of law of attraction, that's essentially kind of your go-to thing right now. So maybe let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the law of attraction, I started understanding that my thoughts shape my reality. I realized that my thoughts were always shaping my reality. My thoughts before were, I'm impoverished, I'm a prostitute, I'm a drug addict, I hate my life. And so my reality reflected that. And then once I started healing, my thoughts changed. I'm an abundant individual, I'm surrounded by spiritual community, I have a connection to the divine. I love my life. And so my reality started becoming that. And so I started calling things into my reality just very slowly, like just to get my confidence up about it. At first, I was like, okay, today I'm going to manifest a blue ball. And I was living in rehab. And so they took us out to go play handball, and it was with a blue rubber ball. And they had never done that before. And I thought,
Mhm.
oh, well, if I could manifest a blue ball, I could probably manifest a bag of peanuts. And then, like I just kept going little by little by little. And then eventually I manifested those squirrels into my life. Thank you very much. I manifested a career for myself, schooling, an apartment, furniture to fill it with, spiritual communities, kindred connections, soulmates in my life. And I continue to utilize the law of attraction in every area of my life because I know that I can use my free will here on earth to get in between my pre-birth planning plot points. And my life is not meant to be about suffering and sadness, not anymore anyway. And so today I'm an active participant in my life, and I utilize the law of attraction all the time.
That's amazing. I would say that there are some people that are significantly better at it than others. Because I've tried and I've never had a blue ball. I've never just had peanuts show up for me.
So I think one of the main things, well, number one, it's about a belief system. So you got to believe that it can come to you. That's number one.
I do.
And then also
Yeah.
language is very important. So you never say, I want, because when you say you want something, you affirm to the universe that you don't have it. So if I say, I want a sports
Mhm.
car, I'm telling the universe, that girl doesn't have a sports car. And so the universe just keeps creating that experience for me. You don't have, you don't have, you don't have. And so the wording can be a very useful tool in this. So, I say things like, I am abundant. I'm not waiting for my abundance. It's here. I'm embodying it. I proclaim it. I stand up. I put my hands on my hips like Superman. And I say, I welcome creative opportunities for financial security. And then they start to come to me. And, I have to also remain very open-minded. It might come from a source that I'm not willing to hear it from. And there's just so many things. But yeah, if anybody's interested in learning more about manifesting, I have a coaching business, and I love taking people through aspects of the law of attraction. And I also do a lot of shadow work and healing trauma and healing addictions with people as well. And my handle on everything is Buddha Betty. It's a play on words. And I'm definitely willing to connect with anybody who's looking for support in any area of their life. And if I can't work with you directly, I'd love to shepherd you to some communities where maybe you could find some understanding and assistance there.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for coming on my show and telling your story and sharing that amazing experience, the many amazing experiences. And thank you for doing what you're doing now. Thank you for, going through what you went through, but then turning around and turning into something positive for others. And that's just really beautiful.
Thank you so much for this space. Grateful to connect.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.